What's up, everybody? This is Elliott, and you're listening to Magical Thinking, brought to you by Art of Magic. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, or you just want to chat, email me at podcast@artofmagic.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Our guest for this episode is the amazing Gary Plants. If you guys don't know, Gary is one of the foremost card technicians in the world. He is an incredible sleight of hand artist. He was a teacher for many years and only practiced magic to fool magicians, but in the last several years he started performing for lay people. And he has some really interesting thoughts about why he does it now and how he wishes he had done it more when he was getting started in magic. Gary knows everybody. He's got the techniques and the skill to sit at the table with some of the best in the world, and he shares some stories about knowing Vernon, Michael Amar, Ed Marlo, Charlie Skinner, and more. So this is a great episode, and I think you're really going to enjoy listening to Gary speak about all of his different experiences. My best friend, David Yanik, who is very friendly with Gary, he lived in Houston for a while, set this up. We were at Magi-Fest, and David was kind enough to persuade Gary, over the course of several hours, to sit down with us and talk with us about his many life experiences. As always, you should follow us on all the social media, facebook.com/magicalthinkingpodcast, facebook.com/asenseofmystery, instagram.com/asenseofmystery, instagram.com/treasuryofwonder, Twitter, so on and so forth, all the good stuff. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Have a good time. Enjoy it. Let me know what you think. It's going to be great. This is the second Magi-Fest podcast of 2016 now. Gary, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and share some of your amazing wisdom and knowledge with us and the listeners. And before we started, you put a couple things in chronological order, and I guess that starts with, how'd you get into magic?
Very interested. Well, seemed like I always had tricks when I was growing up. My dad was a salesman, and he'd be on the road a lot. I remember one little thing, he brought home a little tiny glass bottle, and it had a little tiny penny in it. You know, the penny couldn't fit in there any other way. And when I remember seeing that, I was 6 or 7 years old, and I thought, well, that's magic. You know, you can't put a penny in a bottle. So I was always amazed by that. I got several magic kits when I was growing up, but I think I actually got started in high school. We had a field trip when I was a senior in 1972. We went to Disney World, and they had a magic shop in Disney World, and I went in and I purchased the invisible deck and the sponge rabbits, and I performed pretty much those two things for the next year or two. That's just about all I did, because they always got good reactions, and still do to this day. And so that was probably the real start to getting interested in magic. And then in 1977 I saw an ad in a magazine. It was probably Genie, and it said the first annual West Virginia Magic Convention. Well, I didn't even know what a magic convention was. Didn't even know they existed. The big star on the bill at that time was a guy named Tommy Windsor, who used to work showboats. He was an interesting gentleman. He was quite old at the time, and he passed away a few years later. But it was in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and so I ended up going to that convention, and Doc Daugherty was there. They had a few dealers who used to work for, Doc Daugherty used to work for Al Cohen. Mm-hmm. I bought my first magic card trick from them. It was called Wacky Packet, and now I have the rights to sell that, and I sell that in my booth.
Okay.
And I met two magicians who stood out. And they were kind of heads and shoulders above the other magicians there. One young guy's name was Michael Amar, and the other one was a fellow named Paul Sponaugle. Both of them are still around. I know everybody knows Michael. Paul Sponaugle's out of Atlanta, Georgia, and he's still an active magician to this day. Michael, I remember, Michael must have been 16, 17 years old at the time, and I remember to this day, he performed the Cups and Balls did an excellent job, at that young age. And he also, the other one that stands out in my mind, I remember he performed Jerry Anderson's Miser's Miracle, where you take 2 playing cards, they're bridge-sized cards, and he tears them up and produces 4 silver dollars out of these little tiny pieces of cards, and just blew. I knew nothing, so this trick it just devastated me. So we had a mutual friend named Bruce Sorgman who lived in Charleston, and so Michael came to Bruce's house one time, and Bruce invited me over, and Michael and I became friendly, and so this was again 77, early 78, and at that time I was reading Genie magazine because there was a column in there by Vernon, the professor. Very, very interesting. It was the first thing I read whenever the magazine came in. And so Michael and I were talking in 1978, July 78, they had the 50th SAM convention up in New York City at the Waldorf Astoria. And so Michael and I, we both wanted to see Vernon. Vernon was at the Magic Castle in California. Mm-hmm. And of course, we were so young, it was like, well, that was halfway across the world at the time. So seeing that Vernon was going to lecture in New York City, we were like, okay, that's probably about as close as we're ever going to get.
And he was in his 80s, right?
Yeah, he would have been 6 and 78, so he was 84.
Yeah.
So he was 84 years old. Now, let me tell you this, when I first saw him, he looked like he was 60.
Wow.
Really. I mean, if somebody told you he was 84, you just wouldn't have believed it. He was standing up on the chair when he was lecturing and doing the diagonal palm shift. And I mean, he looked like he was, my age now. I mean, that would be, it was just amazing. So anyhow, Michael and I said, okay, this is what we've got. We've got to go to that convention. And so we did.
To see Vernon.
To see Vernon. That was the reason for going. Well, little did we know that that was the convention that changed my world. I don't know about Michael. I imagine it affected him a lot too, because I will tell you, while we were there, we met Harry Lorraine. We were out in the hall, and Harry Lorraine was talking to Dick Cavett, and somehow we were walking past, and Harry was trying to get people to give him tricks for Apocalypse. Apocalypse had just come out. I bought the first issue or 2 of Apocalypse from Harry at that convention, and he was looking for contributors, and Michael, I don't remember exactly how, I think he was just asking people, anybody have anything they want to contribute, and Michael says, I've got a couple things. So we all went up, Michael, and there was another friend of mine, Jack Adams. There's 2 Jack Adams. This guy was not very well known. There was another more famous Jack Adams, but Jack Adams and Michael and myself, we went up to the room, and Harry came up. And Harry did a lot of magic, a bunch of magic out of close-up card magic and his early books. And then Michael showed him several different card effects. I remember one was I think the Iceman Cometh. If you go back and look in the magazine, you'll see where it's card production or corner of a card in an ice cube, and a couple of card revelations. And so that was Michael's first real, getting a little bit of fame from Harry's Apocalypse. But at that convention, that was one of the first conventions where David Roth was performing, and Darwin Ortiz, the Amazing Randy was there. Probably 40 just really top-notch performers. I remember watching David Roth do hanging coins for the first time.
Wow.
And it was just breathtaking. You're like, what is going on? I mean, nobody had a clue, about that type of, the edge grip and all that. It was just fantastic. And so, after that convention, I remember I went home and I bought all of David's stuff, and we had a little magic shop that put on a contest for magicians, and I had bought the black hole, David Roth's black hole trick, and the hanging coin stuff, and I entered the contest and did almost all David Roth coin stuff, believe it or not, and I won first place in the contest. And a buddy of mine, Richard Barger, I remember he was sitting there, and I showed him a card trick, Bruce Servon's a pivot revelation, and Richard told me, he says, yeah, said when you left, he said, I told my friends, yeah, but that's probably the only thing he knows, is that one thing. So that was kind of a funny story. But learning that magic and nobody, where I live, nobody knew any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to get in some good magic early on, and made a lot of good friends. But that was the convention where I say, okay, I'm hooked on magic for the rest of my life.
And how old were you, like, right around there?
Well, 78. I was born in 54, so 64, 74, so 24.
Okay.
It's 24 years old. And so then a year or two later, I wanted to see Vernon again. And Joe Stevens, I think he started in 78, the Las Vegas Desert Seminar. Yeah. And, of course, I didn't go at that time, 78. I don't think I went in 79. 1980 was the first time I went to that convention. And at that point, I believe there were 95 people. And it was Vernon and Slidini and Mike Skinner and Roger Klaus and Danny Dew and Joe Berg and all these guys that I had just read about in Genie magazine. Sure. And here I am, a 24-year-old punk, just wet behind the ears, and I was in seventh heaven being there. And of course Vernon lectured there along with Slidini. And so I got to see them again. And so I went back every year, 70, 80, 81, 82. Every year. There was one year I didn't go, and it was because I didn't recognize the names. I'm pretty sure Vernon and Slidini were probably there, but the other big names I didn't recognize, so I decided not to go. And those two names were Juan Tamariz and Ascanio. And so...
and you were unaware.
I was totally unaware. Those names did not mean a thing to me at that point in time.
Have you told Tamariz this story?
No.
You haven't told him?
No, I didn't think about it really at the time. But that's one regret that I have in Magic, that I missed that. So I met a lot of, that's when I met all those guys, Mike Skinner and Roger Klaus and Jeff Busby was even there at one or two of them. And a real quick interesting story about that. We were at one of the restaurants in the hotel. It was Jim Lewis and Roger Klaus, Mike Skinner, myself, and Jeff Busby. And we were sitting in a booth, one of these semicircle booths. And so we were talking a little bit, and then a deck of cards comes out and starts getting passed around. And I remember Michael did something, and then he handed the cards to me, and I did something, and I gave them to Roger. And then Roger eventually got passed down to Jeff Busby. And Busby's like, he just took the cards and passed them over to Jim Lewis. And Jim pushed him back. He says, no, it's your turn. You do. I haven't ever seen you do anything. Here, you do something. And Busby wouldn't do it. So that was it. The cards just sat there, and they never went any further around the table. But Busby was a strange guy. Let's see. So that was in the early 80s. And then... the mid-'80s, I got an invitation to Fechter's 4F convention, and then that was another eye-opener. Unfortunately, I never got to see Eddie work. Eddie died about 3 or 4 years before I made it up there. But what year would that have been? I think about 89, somewhere in that range. Juan Tamariz was one of the guests at 4F, and he made me want to throw my cards away. I have never ever been as badly fooled as I was by Tamariz's performance the first time that he came to 4F.
And that was the first time you saw him?
First time I'd ever seen him. I'd heard all about him. I knew nothing about him. Nobody just said, well, he does this or he does this. I knew nothing about him other than he was supposed to be a great magician. And he came up and performed several effects out of mnemonica. And, of course, I didn't even know he was using a memorized deck. And it just devastated me. I mean, it just crushed me. I'm like, okay, I don't know anything. I was at a point where I thought, okay, I'm learning a little bit, and I was just devastated. I mean, he just is such a phenomenal performer, and so that was quite an experience. And of course, Frank Garcia was up there. You know, he all the time, and he performed lots and lots of good magicians at 4F. So it's changed a lot now. Again, used to be 100 people when we first started going. It was actually at the Forks Hotel, and they had a bar on the first floor in a little restaurant, and then you went up the stairs. And when they held the convention, they had these bleachers on three sides, the back and the two sides, and then they had the performers up in the center. And they were all these old hard bleachers. There was no air conditioning. They had windows open or a window fan, and hotter than heck. And everybody was just jam packed in there. But it was so different. It was fun, and so. It's different now. Now there's 250 people.
Yeah.
And it's still a good convention. You got a lot of good performers. I won't say it's not really close up maybe too much anymore, you know, when you're getting billiard ball productions and some of this stuff. But very good convention. And let's see, where are we? So met Herb Zero. That was the first place I met Herb Zero.
Okay.
Was at the 4F convention, and we became friends, and you know, got to go to his room and sit down and talk with him when I came up with some ideas on the Zero Shuffle, and showed them to him and some of his buddies, and got a little feedback from him, and
can you talk a little bit about, because we're still in the 80s kind of, the whole Revelations filming, and you were buddies with MR at the time.
Yeah, Michael, this was, I don't remember. I'm trying to remember what year that would have been, because they just did that 30th anniversary. Was what, a couple years ago? 13 maybe. So 30 years earlier. Right. So probably 83. Yeah, that was about this time.
Okay.
83, 84. Michael was still quite young. He was in his early 20s, and he was one of the ones that got invited up to be up in Canada when the professor filmed the Revelation series. And so Michael was like, you know, he and I were pretty good friends, and he knew I was a Vernon nut, and he's like, well, I need some questions to ask you. I don't know, what am I going to say? What am I going to ask him? So I made a list of questions, and I think Michael told me he still has that list. Not too long ago we were talking about this, because I always kid him about this story. One of the questions, first off, we need to go back a second. But when I first started teaching in '77, I got very interested in false deals. So for 5 or 6 years, I've been practicing false deals, seconds, bottoms, centers. And at that time, I was kind of intrigued with the center deal. So one of the questions I asked Michael to ask him was, you know, what's his opinion on consecutive center deals? You know, do guys do that? You know, I didn't know anybody that even did a center deal. You know, how important is that? So if you've seen the Revelation series, at one point Michael says, Professor says, what about consecutive centers? And Vernon stops and he looks at him, and you could just see this look on his face, and he says, consecutive centers? Now you're talking like a magician. He says, nobody, who needs consecutive centers, you know? Do you realize what just one center deal can do? And I was sitting there when I watched that, and I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad it was Michael that asked him that instead of me. So anytime I see Mike, I say, Mike, you remember that story about the consecutive center deals? And
I don't actually know if that would be in the DVDs now, because when they put the set out, they edited out a lot of the Vernon going after Michael, or
I'm very confused about that now, because I know it was in the original tapes, and then I had heard that it got edited out of it seemed like it was in the original Videonics tapes, and then it got edited out the first run of the L&L videos, and then I thought I saw it back in again. And then we've got the 30th anniversary set. So I don't know. I don't know whether it's in there or not. Yeah. But if you have the tapes, you can certainly go back and see. It was quite funny, but I was just so glad it was Michael and not me that got the chewing out on that. But that was, that was. Oh, I'm so happy that they did that. And then a few years ago, I've always collected a lot of anything related to Vernon.
Right.
And I have a nice collection of audio recordings. Back in 1978, when he lectured at the Waldorf Astoria, I have 3 or 4 hours of that lecture, and a whole bunch of that. Bob White recorded his lecture in 1969, and it was a very, very, very good lecture and very good recording. And so I digitized all of these things. I have those on the computer, and then also a large video collection of Vernon lectures over in Hawaii and in Washington, D.C. And if the Vernon lecture was out there, I pretty much knew, where it was, and who had it, and if possible, I tried to get a copy of it. And so Louis Falanga contacted me a couple of years ago, and he wanted to know what the best Vernon videos I had in my collection, and I told him what I had, and he says, "Well, I'm thinking of putting out a 30th anniversary collection of the Revelation series. This is 30 years since it was produced." And so I told him I knew of these 3 lectures that were top notch that I thought would be really good to have in the series. So one I had just seen a year or 2 earlier. I think it was Art Emerson had videotaped Vernon in Washington, D.C. And he had some things on there that was quite rare, that were not on other video recordings. So I recommended him to get hold of Arthur Emerson and see if he could get permission to put that in the set. And then I knew of 2 lectures that Bill Larson had filmed early on, back when hardly anyone had video cameras. And Bill set that up at the Magic Castle, and did some lectures, of the 2 lectures that Vernon did, and they were very, very good. And I had some copies that had leaked out, but they were 3rd, 4th generations. They weren't very good. I mean, they weren't very good quality. The material was good, but the quality wasn't. And so I told him, I said, okay, I know this is in the Magic Castle Library. It's this. Here's the date, and this is what you want. If you can get the Art Emerson and get these 2 Vernon lectures, you should do that. So he contacted Erica Larson at the castle, and she was able to go through whatever the committee is, the group at the castle, and get permission to allow Louis to get those 2 Magic Castle lectures, and then Art Emerson gave him permission to put that in the set. And those 3 lectures together are just worth their weight in gold, in my opinion. So so that's how those videos came to be in the set. I did say Louis Falanga, when Yanik originally filmed the set, they had a professional photographer come in and take all these pictures of Steve Freeman and Vernon, I think, and Louis bought everything. He bought all outrights, the photos and the slides and everything, and Vernon and Louis sent me. I've got all these. I've got like over 100 slides of Vernon, with the cups and balls and the cones and the linking rings and all this. And then of course Michael. There's some of Michael and Gary so those are wonderful. I'm in the process of digitizing all of that stuff as well.
Neat.
So so very good. I'm so glad they did. I wish Vernon had been a little bit younger, for those, but it's better than not having it at all.
For sure.
Yeah. Back at the first convention, I went to that 1977 convention, and then went to the 1978. No, it's 1977. The same year, I went to the first Magi-Fest convention that I ever attended. And there was a lot of interesting guys there. One of the guys I met early on, it may not have been the first one, but it was one of the first couple, was Harry Reiser. And I remember I was out in the lobby, and I had my cards, and I was doing some stuff, and an old friend of mine, Larry Pringle, he's not around, and he passed away, but Larry was very good friends with Harry, and he brought Harry over, and I was sitting there doing some stuff, and Larry says, Gary, he says, would you do some seconds for Harry for me? And I looked up, and that's the first time I ever met Harry. So I looked at him and I said, well, I said, do you want them with bees or do you want them with the white borders? And he laughed, he shook his head, and he says, uh-oh. He says, I know I'm in trouble now. Whether because the bees are so much easier. I just thought, well, if you really want to see it, you should use a white border. But that was, I always thought that was funny, his comment, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now.
So around that time in I think you said 77, 78,
Uh-huh.
were you really into the false deals and gambling stuff right around then?
Okay, I started teaching. I taught chemistry for 33 years. I started teaching in 77. So it was right around the time of when I was finding out about magic conventions and things like that. And so at the end of my first teaching year, which would have been June of 78,
okay.
I was going to have two months off from school to do whatever I wanted. And for whatever reason, I think it was because I wanted to be able to do something that other people couldn't. So I got interested in false deals. And as I said before, there wasn't a lot of people who could do second deal. I never met anybody at the time who could do seconds and bottoms and fool you with them. You might see a real bad one. So at that time I bought the Martin Nash books, the 3 trilogy, the trilogy set. And so the summer of 78, I spent my whole entire summer practicing second deals and bottom deals, and then eventually got into trying some center deals. And I was just interested in it because at the time I would be showing tricks to somebody, and then next thing you know, they're doing the same tricks. And so I was like, okay, I want something they can't just take that hit and do it. If they are, they're going to have to put in a lot of work.
For sure.
So I think that's really why I wanted to be able to do the deals, because I knew the deals were not easy to do.
Were you ever performing at this time for lay people, or?
Never. I very, very rarely. I performed a handful of times for lay people.
Students ever?
Yes, twice a year. Back when I was in college, I did a fraternity party. I did magic. We won't even go there, but I did magic for a fraternity party, and that was fun. And then I did later on. There was a college that had me come over during when testing was going on. They wanted to give them a little break, and I did coffee house, and I went around table to table and did a few things. But for the most part, I did magic for magicians at magic conventions. That was really the only time I performed. And so in my mind, my way of thinking, I wanted to be able to fool magicians, and I wanted to be able to do moves that, the different passes, and I wanted to try to learn complicated sleight of hand so that, people say, yeah, you got to see this guy do this, it's really difficult, or, he does it really well. And wasn't really so concerned with performing for lay people at the time. Now I regret that. I feel like I wasted many, many, many years of my life doing that. I enjoyed it at the time, and it's what I wanted to do at the time. But I think I wouldn't recommend it really. I think that performing for real people is what magic's about nowadays.
But I'll say you did accomplish your goal because.
Because your dad got Garrett Lance.
Yeah, and that's how we met here at Magi-Fest a few years ago. As I came up and I was like, I need help on my bottom deal,
Right. So yeah, I guess in a sense it served a purpose.
Yeah.
But again, I think if I had it to do over again, I'd probably try to perform more for real people than trying to fool magicians. But it was fun, and that's what at the time that's what I wanted to do. Let's see, Steve Forte, you wanted to talk a little bit about Steve. I met Steve back in Las Vegas quite a few years ago, and there's so much you could say about Steve. I mean, if there's anybody better out there, I can't imagine. I would love to see him if there's anybody that can even hold a candle to Steve. And he's such a gracious, humble guy, and he just destroys you with stuff. But I remember we went to his house one time, and my wife was with me, and at the time I had been reading about riffle shuffle tracking, and thinking about like one deck and being able to keep track of cards and stuff. Didn't really understand it too much, and Steve proceeds to pull out these 6 decks of cards and do riffle shuffle tracking with 6 decks of cards all shuffled up, and it was just mind-boggling. It was just impossible. And he showed me so many things that everything completely fooled me. Spreads a deck of cards, my deck, spreads them face up, and has me just name any card in the center of the deck. And he just scoops the cards up, and they're in dealing position. There's no breaks or anything. Just scoops it up, and then bam, immediately just the card you name, he just deals it right out of the center, and he can repeat it. And
that's amazing.
And you tell people that, and they're like, oh no, they're you're missing something, and then they go and they see it, and they're
he would do it consistently, back to back.
You could spread it again and say, just name another card right in the center. And he just picks it up, puts it in dealing position, and bam, out it comes. And he did some of his memory stuff with cards. It's just, here's one. I'll tell you, this is probably the greatest story about Steve. So we're there, and I'm shuffling my cards, and we're talking. And Steve says, "Let me see your cards." And he takes them from me, and he starts arranging cards. I don't know what he's doing. So he takes it for about 15 seconds, arranges cards, and he hands me my deck back. And he says, "Go ahead." He says, "Go ahead and shuffle your cards." And shuffle. Good. Give him another shuffle. Give him another shuffle, and give him a cut. So I did. And he says, Now just start dealing cards down to the table. And I started dealing. I dealt, cards, and all of a sudden Steve says, "Okay, stop." And I stopped, and he says, "Turn over the next card." I did, and it's an ace. He says, "And turn over the next one, and the next one, and the next one," and it was the 4 aces.
What?
And I had shuffled the cards, my cards, myself, and I had shuffled them 5 or 6 times and cut the cards. Now, again, how do you explain that? I mean, it's impossible. I'll tell you what he did. He noticed that when I was shuffling, I guess I had spent so much time with the zero shuffle, that I was leaving a slug on the bottom of the deck every time, naturally, without thinking about it.
And he picked up on this.
He's watching me shuffle, and he sees I'm laying a block of 5 or 6 cards every time I shuffle. So what he did was he just took the cards and he put the 4 aces on the bottom of the deck and handed them back to me. And he says, "Now shuffle." Well, I'm laying that slug. I'm doing a false shuffle for you. I'm keeping the aces there. And then he's a master at estimation. When he says, "Now cut the deck," and so now he knows all 4 aces are 25, 26 from the top. He says, "Just deal the cards face up." And and at that point he may have been you know what? My guess is he probably had 5 cards on the bottom, the 4 aces and a key card. So now he starts dealing them. Bam! When that key card comes out, he says, "Stop," and then there's your 4 aces. But I didn't figure it out. He told me.
Yeah.
I said, "Steve, you can't do that. That's impossible." And he's like, "Oh no, it's easy. Here's what you were doing." But see, that's from his watching people, in the casinos shuffle and all that. She's just a genius.
That's great.
And
what did your wife think of?
Oh, she was
being there.
She was blown away too. I mean, she's seen a lot of magic and stuff, so she knew how good he was.
Sure.
But the thing is, he's just such a humble and gracious guy. That's what is so amazing. If anybody should have an ego, it should be Steve.
Him,
but it's just the opposite. It's a shame. It's a shame a lot of other people don't, do the same thing. But some people let it go to their heads. Unfortunately. Let's see, Magi-Fest again. Okay, so we'll go back there a little bit. Saw Del Rey. Del Rey is, it's so hard to say this. It's like, who's the best magician, or who's the favorite performer. That's very, very hard to answer, but because when I was getting ready to say, well, Del Rey's my most favorite performer, and in many respects he is, but then I think of Tamariz, and I love watching Tamariz. So I will say that if I had, I've really, really, really enjoyed seeing Del Rey perform. He was one of a kind. He was unique, and his act was just amazing. And I remember one year we were at the Magi-Fest, and Del used to work in Columbus all the time, and it just so happened that the Magi-Fest was on when he was working a show here in Columbus. And about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night, I look over the door, and here comes Dale through the door with his big table that weighs 200 pounds. He walks right into the lobby at the hotel, sets his table down, sets it up, and sits there and performs his close-up act for anybody that was in the lobby. There were a lot of magicians that missed it. There were shows going on.
Yeah.
So you just had to be in the right place, the right time.
Wow.
And his magic was, again, it's like, as good as Steve is with cards. Del Rey is that with magic. I mean, you see this stuff and it's just impossible. I saw Del many times. I saw him probably 8 or 10 times, but he did a Conan Pence routine that, to this day, I've talked to Danny Block, a friend of mine, about it. And that's the trick where you take the quarters on the back of the hands and you cover it with a dollar bill. He used a dollar bill, rolled it up, and I know the trick. I'm familiar with it, and I'm watching, to see I'm thinking, okay, I want to see how he gets rid of the coins, how he gets rid of the quarters, and so he pushes down on the top of the bill, and the coins fall through the lady's hands, and he just reaches up and just flicks the bill off his hand, and those coins are gone. He didn't lift it up from the bottom. I'm going, okay, how's he go there? And he just flicked it, and they were gone. And I talked to Danny about. Danny saw him do the same thing, and that was the only time out of the 8 or 10 shows. That was the only time I ever saw him do the Captain. So I never got to see it again. But I have no clue where the coins that were in the bill went.
That's a treasure.
Yeah, it was amazing. So his act was very, very special, and then of course Juan Tamariz was lucky enough to get to spend a few days at Juan's summer home in Cadiz a couple of years ago, with Paul Wilson and Eric Mead, and that was again just memory that you'll never forget. So there was, Tamariz is a genius, just like Steve Forte is, and our daily schedule, I'll just tell you that because it didn't change from day to day.
Mm-hmm.
We arrived at one's home, it was about 4 p.m., and one was still in bed. So he got up shortly thereafter, and he went out and he bought a big leg of ham and brought it back and set it up, and so everybody ate a little bit of the hamon. I think that's what they call it over there, hamon. And then we went out on the back porch. He has a netted back porch to keep the bugs out, and we all sat out there and talked magic and did some magic until about 10 o'clock at night. 10 o'clock at night, one says, okay, it's time to go to dinner. So we get up and we head out and we go to a real nice restaurant, and we're there from 10 o'clock till 1 o'clock in the morning. 1 o'clock we get back, we go back out on the back porch, and we sit there until about 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. Sun's coming up.
Wow.
We're doing magic. And then we all go to bed about 7:30 in the morning. And he has these black things on the windows, shades to keep the light out. So we go to bed, and we wake up about 4 o'clock, and we go in and we get a little bit of ham and hamon, and go out on his back porch and do magic and talk magic until 10 o'clock at night, and then we went and had dinner and came back, and it was the same thing every night. And he's so wonderful. I mean, he brings magicians in every summer for about, I think I was told, for like 3 months, and just has sessions like that with all these different magicians from all over the world.
And how long were you there for?
We were there almost a week. It was 5
Okay.
nights, I believe,
Okay.
total. And then, and it was, interesting. So my wife didn't speak Spanish, and one's wife didn't speak English, so we were kind of worried, how that would go over. But luckily, they had just gotten Wi-Fi in the where they stayed, and my wife had an app, a translation app. I think it was called iTranslate.
On
And
her
so,
iPad or?
on her iPad,
Yeah.
and so she pulled that up, and she wanted to ask a question, so she typed it in and showed her, and her eyes lit up, and so she went and got her iPad and downloaded the app, and so literally for like 6 hours while we're out there doing magic. I mean, she ended up going to bed about 7 o'clock in the morning with me, but they were sitting there being able to carry on a conversation, and that was the first time that she'd been able to communicate with someone that spoke only English because of this app.
Yeah, and
so
passing their iPads around.
It was very, very nice.
That's great.
But we had a great time. I didn't get to see any of Cadiz because there was not 1 minute of free time. But Debbie got to go out and visit. So that was a lot of fun. And oh my goodness, the magic that Juan does. I was very, very sick. I didn't know he had a big show on Monday. I think it was Monday night. I think we left on Sunday, and he had a big show on Monday there for the people in Spain. And had I known that, I would have held off one more day and gone to see him perform. But I didn't know. We'd already made travel plans and on the train and things like that, so we weren't able to do that.
When was this? How recently was this?
That's about 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 summers ago.
Because I'm curious if really enjoying Juan and spending time with Juan influenced your own outlook on performing for lay people.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk
Yes,
about it
sir.
a little bit?
Well, I mean, he just made me realize. He says, if you're not performing for real people, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
people.
of course.
If you're not performing for real people, he says, you're not doing magic. He said that's what magic's for. Magic is for entertaining, people who want to see the magic, and it, it just got me thinking, like, that's magic is for people that don't know magic, and so and I won't go into any details, but it's got me performing some now for lay people.
Sure.
And it never really sunk in until he told me that, and I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it definitely did affect the way I feel about performing now for lay people. And that's what I said a while ago. Feel like I've wasted the first 30 years of my life, because I just think how much more better performer I could have been for lay people had I. And I really do enjoy it. It's a whole different experience than sitting there doing seconds and bottoms for magicians.
Are you still doing like crazy knuckle busting sleight of hand, or for lay people, or are you kind of sticking to the?
Yeah, no, I don't really see the need to do that. I try to show them, things that are more oriented for lay people. I do Gypsy Thread. I do a coins across, and
do you want to talk about Gypsy Thread at all?
David, your face lit up.
Well,
I just, I get.
You don't have to. It's not something that you want to talk about.
It's none of it's really my idea. It's just I think I found a method that is very good, and it's one of two people's, depending on how you look at it. I think 2 people came up with it independently.
Okay.
I learned it. I was shown it by my friend Richard Hatch, who owns H&R, half owner of H&R Magic Books.
He's the H.
Yeah, he's the H, and he published this in Mum quite a few years ago. And the one problem that I've always loved Gypsy Thread, but the one problem that I've always seen with it is the little ball starts in the center, and when you start pulling the thread, the ball always went to one side or the other. It pulled, you saw the ball move to the left or move to the right whenever it was performed. Well, Richard came up with a method for doing the setup, and the ball stays in the center when you
it doesn't get tangled.
I've probably performed it 150 times, 200 times, and it's never one time tangled. And I would not really perform that using the figure 8 method and all of the methods that I'd seen before. It seemed like they always once in a while would tangle, and then you were really in a mess. So once I learned Richard's method, then I felt very comfortable with it, and so I use that. That's one of the opening tricks that I do when I do perform for lay people.
And I think we talked about this. It adds to the illusion of like the pieces fusing.
Yeah.
Because that ball stays in the center.
And it just looks like it's just kind of bouncing around right there.
As you're pulling your hands apart, that ball's just kind of floating there right in the middle, and it just...
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I've never thought about that, because if the ball moves, then
to
it
one
looks
side
like
it looks like
the
it's
thread
unraveling.
is just being pulled
Yeah.
apart.
Yes.
But if it stays, wow, I've never even thought about
Yeah.
that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
That's cool.
Come to find out, the other person is Gaten Bloom.
Okay.
He just, he had his 2-book series come out, and he apparently independently came up years ago. I don't know who came up with it first.
Sure.
But they were both independently developed. Richard didn't know about Gaten's, and
Sure.
Gaten didn't know about Richard's.
Like calculus.
But they, I think it's the best method, at least for setting it up and visually with it staying in the center. It's a real good trick that I like.
That's a cool example, though, of you doing magic for
Real people.
real people. Yeah. No, and even some of the other stuff that, and we don't have to go into detail, but some of the other, when I would come over and you would be like putting your set together and show me like, oh, I was gonna do this or this.
Mm-hmm.
It's great magic, but it wasn't like what I thought of when I thought of Gary Plants doing magic, like bottom dealing and center dealing. No, it was just good,
Strong
good
magic.
classic magic. That's pretty simple, but so well constructed. Like Gypsy Thread.
Sure.
Oh yeah, and this won't make any sense since there's no video with this, but there's just amazing little touches with Gypsy Thread that you learn when you start performing it. And there was this 2 things that I saw Fred Capps do. He was on a video and he's performing the Gypsy Thread, and he's doing the method. Now he did have I think it was the running, thread in the center. He didn't have the method where it stayed in the center. But when you're starting out and you've got all the little pieces. So you've got the one thread in the one hand, and then all the other pieces wadded up into a little ball in the other, and you come over and you press it against the one remaining thread. See, this won't make any sense on
Sure will.
audio. Okay.
Yeah, you got
So anyway, you take the little pieces and you squeeze them, and they stick on the center ball.
Yeah.
Now, what I was doing was coming over and trying to grab the loose end of the thread that's hanging down, but you've got pieces between your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got your pieces here and you're trying to grab this loose piece of thread,
You kind of having to.
that thread's kind of
Sure.
bouncing around, moving around. Fred Capps goes, boom, boom.
So he
and
grabs.
and he
the
reaches
top.
over and just reaches over with the top, which isn't moving. It's already pinched between your fingers. He takes that piece
Just
and
transfers.
now he just transfers the pieces where you've got the pieces in, and he just reaches up and grabs the part that you're already holding on to, and then he's able to reach down and grab something that simple. So now, after the revelation, here's the other great part of Fred Capps. He pulls the thread out. It's restored. Now, instead of doing okay, how am I going to get rid of the pieces or any of this? He just puts this piece up with the other and then comes down onto the palm of the hand, balls all the little pieces up together and puts it in his jacket pocket. So there's no heat. There's never any chance.
That's his cleanup.
That's his cleanup, right? And it was just those little things, you know, the difference of having the ball in the middle, not having to chase the loose end, and then not running, you know, what am I going to do with the loose pieces? Just having this very, very simple cleanup.
It's just elegant.
It's elegant, exactly. It's just beautiful, and it's fun to do. You know, when you know when you know exactly what's going to happen, you don't have to worry about anything. It's fun. You can put everything into the presentation.
Yeah.
You wanted something about Marlo, I guess.
Yeah, I mean we've talked about Vernon for a little bit.
Speaking of Vernon, let's go back to one thing.
Okay.
And then we'll jump to Marlo.
Yeah.
Vernon wrote a book called Revelation many years ago, and it was not published for about 30 years, and then Mike Caveney finally published Revelation. It came out. And there was a
Revelation is
Vernon's annotations, right? Vernon's annotations on Erdnase.
Right.
So a gentleman, I won't mention his name. A gentleman used to have Ed Marlo annotate. He would buy a book. It didn't matter. It was Darwin Ortiz. I've got several of these sets of annotated notes. Ed Marlo would take somebody's copy.
Yeah.
And I know Charlie Randall sent Marlo a copy of one of the books that he had and had it annotated. So anyway, someone gave Marlo Vernon's Revelations to be annotated.
So Marlo's about to annotate
Vernon's
annotations on Erdnase.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, if you've ever seen these annotations, they're all in third person.
Yeah. Yep. Marlo talks about himself in the third person.
Yes. So it would say something like, if he makes a comment, he would say, "Oh, Marlo's method in magazine number 2 is much better than this."
It's a little creepy.
Yeah, in my opinion, yeah, a little bit. But anyway, he goes through and he annotates all of Vernon's comments.
And like when you showed it, most of the annotations were him
in favor of Marlo. Marlo's better this, that, and the other.
90% of the annotations are Marlo has a better version of this in this.
Right. And if you go through and you look at any of the notes, that's the way they are. You know, that's the way they are. And so anyway, this guy, after he had Marlo annotate Vernon's book, he takes it to Vernon. And he says, "Vernon, look, Marlo annotated your notes. Here, take a look at it." So Vernon took the book and he flipped through it and he read all these, you know, annotations, and then he pulls out a coin and draws a little circle, and all he writes is, "Keep striving, Ed," and then he signs his name, Di Vernon, in the little circle. Just said, keep striving, Ed.
Burn!
Oh my God. So yeah, that was interesting. There.
And then, to your knowledge, did that ever get back to Marlo?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if he took it back to Marlo.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, for sure.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I'd never heard anything more than that. Of course, you know, Vernon liked Marlo, and they were at the castle. You know, there's film of them together, Charlie Miller and Vernon and Marlo, and you know, they all had good things to say about each other. So that's it. But that's just a funny story.
That's great.
But as far as Marlo goes, I corresponded a few times with him. I think the first letter I wrote, I asked him how he came up with tilt. You know, there was a big controversy about Vernon and Marlo with the tilt. So anyway, I wrote him a couple of letters, and he wrote back and answered them. And I'll tell you, remind me to tell you about the first letter I got from Vernon later. But Marlo was doing a lecture. I think it was called 30 Years Later. In St. Louis, Missouri, and John Mendoza put on the convention. He brought in Ed Marlo, and it was quite interesting. He lectured. He was very far away from the audience. He was probably 15 feet away, 10 feet maybe, 15 feet away. So he was able to do some of this esoteric stuff like, pulling cards out the back of the deck. He could set his hand down on them and take the deck away, and just things that, under normal close-up conditions, I don't think it would be too practical. But it was funny when the lecture started. Marlo had lectured in St. Louis 30 years earlier, and he pointed to one of the guys sitting in the front row. He says, "Look at this." He said, "This guy was here 30 years ago, and he fell asleep in my lecture, and he's already fallen asleep here now today." But, he had some great ideas. I mean, he has some good stuff, but he wasn't a real dynamic performer. It's my opinion. But like I said, that was the only time I saw him. I will tell you this: it was funny. We were up in a room. I remember Don England was there, and maybe Mike Powers. I don't remember for sure if Mike was there, but there was about a dozen people up there, and somebody said, "Well, here, show Marlo a trick." And at that time I was doing the deals, so I had this trick with a bottom deal in it. So I did the routine, and Marlo was smoking his cigar. He's sitting there and he's watching and he's nodding his head. Yeah. Didn't say anything. So I finished the routine, did the revelation, and I think I did like 5 bottom deals during the routine. So never said anything. And this was real late. It was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. So things started closing down, and everybody was leaving. So I was one of the last ones to go, and so I got up to leave, and Marlo came over and he goes, "So whose bottom deal was that you were doing, in that trick?" And I had no idea what to say to him. I said, "Well," it was probably one of the ones you have. I said, "I'm not really sure." I said, "I've read all your stuff, and I've read a lot of stuff on the bottom deals." I said, "But it's probably one of yours." And he's just, "Oh,
sounds like
okay."
the right answer.
But I found it interesting that he wouldn't ask. He didn't ask until everybody had gone, leaving out of the room. But,
But that brings up a good point. When you were developing those deals, you don't really do anyone's deals per se. Like they're pretty unique to you.
Yes, like we were talking earlier, there wasn't a whole lot written about seconds and bottoms. I remember early on, I bought the Phantom at the card table, which I enjoyed very much. And speaking of that letter of Vernon, that's what the letter was about. So while we're on this, I'll come back to that. I bought the Phantom at the card table.
Is that the Gambler's
book club
version?
Yeah. Okay.
I had 2 versions. I had a little tiny small version, spiral bound, and then
the blue,
and
blue
then
spiral
I had there was a second version that they put out. I bought both of those.
Okay.
And so let me think. Where was I going?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's okay. So Lessons in Dishonesty, Laurie Ireland and Marlo's Second Center's Bottom, Martin Nash trilogy. And then of course Expert Card Technique, and so I had all those. I read everything in all those, and so I've tried all of the different versions there. But
you mean did you try
Erdnase?
Yeah,
I did. I read Erdnase. I didn't care for it with that third.
The grip.
Yeah, I didn't care for the grip and the ring finger, pushing the card out. So after trying all that, it was like, okay, none of these seem to really fit me. So I sat down one summer when we were getting ready to start, and I thought, okay, I want to take the second. I just kind of analyzed it and just like, okay, I want my second and regular deal and bottom deal to all look the same.
So same grip.
Same grip. I want to do the same grip. I want to hold the cards. And I don't want to do the Erdnase grip. I want just a mechanics grip, normal grip. And so, I just, with the right hand, I'm like, okay, let's look at the normal deal first. How am I going to do that? Okay. And when I do my normal deal, I've got to have access to the second card. I've got to have access to the bottom card. If I'm going to do seconds and bottoms, I can't not go under the bottom of the deck and deal bottom. So, I just was like, okay, I could just very slowly, okay, I can take the bottom, okay, there I can take the second, and then with the same action I can take the bottom. So that's what I started practicing. So, I read it all, I had all the ideas in my head, but I just kind of worked it out. Oh yeah, the Artanis, the closest method, the thing that fit me the best, and I didn't learn it from the Artanis deal, but after I ended up with the deals that I do, the Artanis method most closely resembles what I do as far as the take and everything on the bottom deal.
Right.
So I would have trouble saying, just like Marlo said, whose is it? Well, there's probably a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but I really came up with most of it myself, as far as what I use.
Yeah.
What was that Vernon Letter?
Oh yeah, the Vernon Letter. Well, this was this was right after I saw him up in New York at the SAM in 78. Right. And so about sometime there a year or so later, I had read the Phantom at the Card Table. Well, if you read that, there's a portion of the book where he says, oh yeah, Scott could have you shuffle the cards, hand you half of the deck, and he could tell you, you've got 2 kings and 3 aces in your cards, or I've got 1 king and 3 aces, or whatever it would be. And there's absolutely nothing in the Phantom at the Card Table that can explain that. I mean, he taught the punch deal. He taught the punch deal. But it's like, okay, that doesn't work. You can't explain it. And there's nothing in the book. So I wrote Vernon a letter. I'm like, surely he knows all the story about, what was going on. So I wrote him a nice letter and asked him if he knew how could this possibly be explained. And I remember, again, I was about 24, 25 years old. And I was like, I wonder if he's going to, is he going to write back? Is he not going to write back? And
did he write back and say, Eddie McGuire's a liar, he made it all up?
So I remember it was a Saturday. I don't ever remember the day. It was Saturday. And I went out to the mailbox and opened it up. And
it was Christmas.
And there was a letter, from Vernon Stationery and stuff. And I thought, oh my God, here it is. And I remember I didn't even open it immediately. I just sat there and looked at it like, I can't believe it. You wrote it back. And so finally I opened it up and read it. And it was it was a 1-page letter. It wasn't real long, but he said, he said Eddie McGuire wanted to become friendly with Cardini, so he knew Cardini was interested in gambling stuff. So he brought Walter Scott up to do some gambling demonstrations for him. And he said they went to Al Baker's home, and he said, they went over to a drugstore to buy some cards. And he said, and on the way back, Eddie switched those cards for decks that had been punched and edge marked. And when I read that,
there it is. Yeah.
The lights went on. I'm going, okay, there was nothing in there about it. So I get the book out and I go back through there, and of course there was nothing. Now in Gazzo's book, the new one, the Phantoms of the Card Table, the edge work is covered, but it was not covered in the original manuscript. But as soon as I saw that, then the lights went on, and he proceeded to say, Walter Scott was. He said he had a very good second deal, but then he went on to say, he said Martin Nash, Harry Reiser, I think he said Charlie Miller, many others greatly outclassed Walter Scott, when it came to card work. Said he couldn't palm or hold out or do some things. Of course, they had that. There was a lot of friction between Vernon
and that Gazzo's book kind of reflects that quite a bit too from the other side.
Yes. But so that was the first letter I wrote to Vernon. I think I got 5 or 6 letters, from Vernon about different things.
Yeah.
One was about nicknames of different magicians. He had Joe Casari. You guys probably don't even know that name, but his nickname was Earthquake Joe, and it's like, okay, why do they call him Earthquake Joe? And Vernon says, well, it's because he was full of faults, and stuff like that.
The good old days.
Yeah. So let's see.
What other Vernon memorabilia have you got?
Well,
what are your prized collection pieces?
Okay. Probably the most prized Vernon piece is one. I actually have one of the first 12 autographed, numbered $20 manuscripts.
Wow.
Funny story with that. This is a true story, I swear. When I first started going to the Magi-Fest back in '78 or so, there was a magic dealer there named Mike O'Dowd from St. Louis.
Okay.
And I used to buy all my magic books and magic magazines from him, and one day we were talking. He knew I was a big Vernon collector. I got all kinds of Vernon stuff from him, and I said, Mike, I said, do you, by any chance, you have one of the first original $20 manuscripts? And he says, I think I do. Now this is like
just laying around.
Just happened to have
now
one.
again, this was probably 1980, 81. So I asked him.
So this is like 60 years after it was put out.
It was put out in the 32.
Okay.
It was put out in 30.
So 50 years.
50 years. Yeah.
Okay.
I said, do you have one of the? Because there were many copies that came out afterwards, but the first 12 had a nice cover on it and a seal that was signed by Vernon and Fawcett Ross and so he says, yeah, I think I do have one. I said, I'd really like to get that. If you ever decide you want to sell it, I'll take it. Well, and I went to the Magi-Fest almost every year. So for the next 20 years, I'm like, Mike, you ever find that manuscript? No, I know it's there somewhere, but I'm not sure. So finally, how many years ago was this? Probably 5 years ago. So about 20.
So the key here is consistency.
Yeah, don't give up. No. So like 2010, 2011. So 30 years or so, 40 years. I get an email from Mike, and he's like, "Guess what I found? $20 manuscript," and he also had the $3 manuscript, which was another product. And he says, "They're yours if you want them." And I said, "Well, I want them." So I sent him the money, and he sent me the manuscript. So it took a lot, but it's really nice condition, and still has a card. He had that trick. One of the tricks in there was how to do a second deal.
The no. What's it called?
No.
The no.
No. It's got the hole in the card.
Yeah. Automatic.
Automatic second
That's
deal.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mine still has that card that was sent with the manuscript. It's got the original card with the hole. And I've talked to other. I've only tracked down. I've only tracked down 4. And because it tells you in there, your card is included in this.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of handwriting. Vernon I'm not sure how or why that happened, but Vernon annotated some things in this manuscript.
And you recognize it's Vernon's handwriting.
Oh yeah. And I've tracked down. I thought, well, I wonder how many of these I can find. It'd be cool to know, are all 12 of them still around or not? But I've only been able to track down 4 of them.
4+ years.
3 plus mine.
Okay.
So 4 total.
Okay.
And they're in other collectors. I won't mention their names because I don't know if they would want it out.
Sure.
But they were kind enough. They sent me pictures of theirs, so I can have the number that they have and who has it. And I think the one I have appears to be in much better condition than any of the others. And so that's probably my prized possession. I've got lots of interesting videos, which I like. I loved, for the longest time, I collected silhouettes. And, once you get so many, it's like, okay, do I really need any more?
How many Vernon silhouettes do you have?
Probably 20 or so,
Are these just of
different
random
people?
Okay.
Nobody famous. They're all just people that he probably I think most of them were cut at Pikes Peak in Colorado. But I had some beautiful ones. I had a family of 3, a little girl and a husband and a wife.
Wow.
That when I got it, it looked like it was cut yesterday. It had been just kept. It wasn't hanging, so the sunlight didn't hit it. And everything was dated and signed,
gorgeous.
And they're beautiful.
How did you come across these?
Most of them, I think almost all of them, I found on eBay.
Wow.
But I bought them before many people started looking there.
Uh-huh.
So the prices I paid weren't quite what they're going for today,
Sure.
thankfully. I got my first one from a good buddy, Tim Moore, several years ago, many years ago. And he was a Thurston collector, and I had a nice autographed Thurston photograph. And he had a beautiful little silhouette of a little girl about 9 years old that Vernon had cut, and it was signed and dated. And so we ended up swapping. He wanted the Thurston, and I wanted that. So that was how I got my first one. And then I started looking on eBay, and you'd be surprised. There's 2 up there right now for sale.
Wow.
2 on eBay today. And I'm kind of watching those, but I really don't need them. But if if the price was right, I would probably jump on them.
I think probably the neatest thing you've shown me from your collection, it's I think it's the last picture in one of those big albums that you have, and it's the picture of the original Inner Circle. It's it's like the really tiny one, and
Right.
you have the blow up, right?
Right. Yeah. Now that's a reprint. I mean, it's not the
Yeah,
original
yeah.
photo, but yeah, that was the group, man. If you had to hang with the group, the original New York Inner
Who was
Circle.
in the picture?
Oh man, let's see. Sam Horowitz, Cardini, Vernon, Charlie Miller,
Al
Baker, and sitting on the far left, the only known picture in existence is Arthur Finley.
Wow.
And he's like, can you name all of them? And I named all of them.
Except him.
And he's like, you don't know? I was like, and it was a trick question.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have known.
Yeah. So,
but they're just kicking it. It looked like it was taken right in the middle of one of their sessions.
Oh, wow.
I think
Yeah.
Vernon wasn't even looking at the camera.
no, he and Charlie Miller were
They're all
together
in the
over
corner.
there talking about something.
Wow.
And, Cardini was a big photographer, so it's interesting to know, who took the picture, or did Cardini set his camera up on a timer, to do it. So I'm not sure, but it's a great picture, and like I said, the only known photo of Arthur Finley that I'm aware of.
That's great. I would love to set up a camera at a convention just over in the corner and just set it to take a snapshot every 30 seconds or something. That'd be so cool.
It would be. It would be. Speaking of that, that's one of the things that I've been really big on, trying to save videos and even audio tapes of magicians. I've got a tape. It's not a very good one, but it was of Stuart Judah. It's a lecture. He gave a lecture at a guy's house, and a friend of mine, he's died a long time ago. He had a reel-to-reel. You even know what it is?
I know, I know what
Okay.
it is, yeah.
Thank you, Mad Men.
Had a reel-to-reel tape player, and he took it over. It was down at heck, I'm not going to be able to get the name right now. He was a senator, Senator Walt Rollins, West Virginia, and the lecture was held at his house, and Charlie Carey took this reel-to-reel recorder, big reel-to-reel, set it up, and Stuart Judah does about a 45-minute lecture, and Stuart was very, very sharp. He was a really good magician, and friends with Vernon and all those guys.
He did close-up, sleight of hand, mostly.
Yeah. And so I've got that. I'm the only one, guaranteed, because I got it right straight from him off the reel-to-reel, and then he died very shortly thereafter. And like I said, it's not really good. You can hear Stuart talking and lecturing, and I've often thought I'd try to sit down one day and transcribe it, because we've got Stuart's tricks. They're recorded.
Sure.
So if you could just match up the trick with what he's saying, it might be kind of fun. And then there's a lot of chatter. Charlie just let the thing keep playing. So you hear them eating dinner, and they're talking about how much gas is across the street and all this stuff. But
That's awesome.
But you've got the whole lecture there.
I would be just as interested to listen to dinner.
Yeah. What year did you say? Roughly?
I think I have the date on the tape. It was in the 60s, early 60s. But there's a lot of videos. There's a lot of old timers with videos from that they have filmed. People come to town and lecture. There was a guy up in Canada had a whole wall of videos, and I contacted him. I'm like, these things are dying there on your shelf. They really need to be digitized. And he's like, nah. He says they're just landfill. He says, when I'm done with them, they're just going to go in the landfill. I'm not going to do anything with it. And there's a lot of good magic of people that aren't around today that really need to be saved. The SAM library has some great films, the Magic Castle, the Magic Circle.
Sure.
But there's a lot sitting in people's hands all over the place that's just going to be thrown away, or it's already deteriorated so bad. So,
but you've kind of made that like one of your hobbies or specialties. Like you,
right.
You have like beta tape players and all these VCRs and stuff, like just to convert and digitize
I have
all
a
this.
beta machine set up right now at my house, and
I've never even seen one of those.
yeah, I bought one.
What was the one that I hauled back?
That was beta. That was a beta,
Okay.
and that
See,
one
I
didn't
don't even
work. And that one didn't work, and I had to find another beta, which I did, and it actually worked. I got what I needed these for. Roger Klaus passed away,
Okay.
and he had a quite nice collection of magic on beta. A lot of lectures. I've probably got 8 or 10 full lectures. Some of these lectures are 7 or 8 hours of Roger
Holy
performing.
cow. Wow.
And so I immediately digitized all that. But he had a lot of beta tapes. He had 60 or 70 beta tapes with all this wonderful magic on it. TV magic from those years,
That was just
And-
taped on.
taped on the beta machine. Now,
Yeah.
Beta was very good quality. So, there's that. And what was it? Somebody? Oh, I just got another big box of beta tapes that was in a person's garage.
Wow.
Matter of fact, I digitized one. This guy did hypnosis shows at a high school, and her dad had been dead for 20 years, and she never seen these tapes. And so I digitized one at Friendswood High School. He's doing a magic hypnosis show. Digitized it and gave it to her right there at Christmas time, so she was able to see her dad, performing one of her shows that she'd never seen.
Oh wow,
before.
that's
So
amazing.
Just very nice. And I hope we don't. It just makes me sick to think. Maybe wouldn't it be great to be able to see Max Malini or Nate Leipzig or
Jeez,
Paul
yeah.
Rossini and see these guys performing some of their magic that we hear about.
Yeah.
And it could, there's maybe some of that setting out on video that's just going to be destroyed.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, like, I mean, if you guys have any type of like tapes that there may be like either your uncles or whatever.
Yeah,
you don't
even
know.
if you think they may not be of interest to anybody.
Yeah, get in touch with us or with Gary, and I mean, we would be glad to take a look at them, because that's
Yeah.
super.
Just want to preserve the history.
Yeah, the
of
history.
craft
And you
the
did.
art.
You actually did a
Absolutely.
really cool presentation at MagicCon a few years ago concerning.
Right, same sort of idea. Put together a little collection of tapes, videos that I'd collected to show people, stuff that's out there.
There was items in there that
amazing.
no one had ever seen before.
Exactly. Yes, guarantee.
Yeah.
Some things no one ever seen.
What is the ultimate goal for all of this stuff? I mean,
I just
I know
think-
you've digitized a lot of it, but what's going to happen to it?
That's a good question.
Down the road.
That's a real good question. In my mind, there's really only 3 groups that probably even care anything about it, and that would be the SAM, the IBM, and the Magic Circle. Now there may be one or two I'm not getting, but what I'll probably do, or what I hope to do, is to just take these hard drives where I have all the videos stored and just make 2 or 3 copies. Give one to the SAM, one to the IBM. Oh, Magic Castle. Did you mention the Magic Castle? Yeah. IBM, SAM. Right now, I don't think the IBM really has anything at all video related. The SAM does, Magic Circle does, and then the Magic Castle. And I told Bill Goodwin, who's a good friend of mine, I said, eventually I'll just make a copy of the hard drives that I have. My wife is ready to shoot me. I have so many of these hard drives. But I just think that future magicians will want to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Roger Klaus, lecture. I've got some
In
wonderful
concert.
yeah, I've got some wonderful Mike Skinner footage that some friends of mine have filmed years ago. And Michael was a wonderful magician. He had a larger repertoire than probably any other magician that ever lived. And
Sure.
These guys don't have a chance to see him perform. And the stuff that is available, Michael was up in years, and it just wasn't his best performances. So to be able to see Michael, when he's 30 years old or 35 years old, when he's really on his money, is nice. And there's little snippets of Francis Carlisle, just people,
Jeez.
films that most people don't get a chance to see, and it would be nice.
Don't even know they exist.
Don't know that they exist. And I've talked with Lance Pierce about it. We're really trying to figure out a way to make these available to magicians to be able to see. But
I mean, eventually, I think you could do something with some sort of just an online streaming database.
Dennis Bear's Conjuring Archive.
Right. Something akin to that, only just like a video archive.
Something
Yeah.
I don't know what any copyright
well, that's
issues
the
or anything
that's
like
the
that.
thing.
Yeah.
Who originally owned them, and are there copyright issues that you have to deal with? A lot of the really good magic are TV shows that probably still have possibly some type of copyright issues.
Right.
Sure.
But
So I guess it is just a matter of waiting for a lot of that stuff.
or finding out how to do it. Maybe the copyright laws will change someday and make it easier to be able to make stuff like this available.
Yeah.
But I just think it's something that should be preserved. I know how I would love to see, Paul Rossini and Leipzig and those guys, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And the Leipzig apparently had a film he showed during his shows of this coin across these knuckles. He had a big screen and he showed this movie. So it existed at one point in time, and maybe it's still there.
Still does.
But maybe hoarded up in somebody's collection. Who knows?
Or in an attic somewhere.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
could be anywhere. Golly.
Alex Elmsley,
Yes, please.
Lewis. Oh man, this goes way back. Okay, so Michael, I told you before, Michael M.R. and Michael was from Bluefield. I lived in Charleston, which was about 3 hours apart. We became friendly, and so one of the first, maybe the first videos. I mean, it's definitely one of the first. Was Michael's card mastery series, Easy to Master Card Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael asked me to help him out with that. So we got together and, talked over tricks of what would be good to put on this set. And so I think I flew to Sacramento. I think that's where we did the filming for that. So we filmed those 3 sets, which I guess were, if not the most successful, certainly one of the most successful series in magic videos. And then I was teaching at the time and kind of got busy and was hard to get around, but Michael was kind enough to call and invite me up to Lewis's place when Alex Elmsley decided to come over and film some of his magic. So I spent 3 days up there. Paul Chaucy was there. I actually roomed with Paul Chaucy.
Wow.
And got to meet him for the first time, and then Alex was there. And you can say so much, but Alex had not been real active in magic at that point, and I was very, very surprised when we did the shooting on all of those things that you see on the DVDs. I only remember one time that he had to stop and do a retake, and it was on one of the manipulation. He was doing an ace manipulation between the fingers, and some little something didn't go right, and so we did a second take on that. So almost everything that you see on those DVDs were first take, every single one of them.
That's incredible. And you said he'd been sort of out of
for quite a long time. I mean, he was still, I think, reading magic and stuff, and maybe with a few friends, but he wasn't performing and participating much in magic. And he liked his scotch. He kept a couple of bottles of scotch there while we were there. But he could sure hold his liquor. And I think I mentioned to you guys, Alex, got to know him pretty good for those 3 days that we were up there, and he was to lecture a month later in Las Vegas at Gino Minari's. Gino Minari put on 1 or 2 close-up conventions, and since Alex was there, he had him come and give a little lecture. So during that convention, we were sitting out by one of the bars. We were sitting there talking and doing magic, and I'm not really a drinker. I don't even know much about alcohol, and I was going to go and get a Coke at the time. So I get up and I said, Alex, would you like something to drink? And he says, yes, I'll take a double such and such. I like I said, I still to this day don't remember what
Some
it was.
type of scotch.
The type of scotch, right? He says, I'll take a double something something. So I go into the bar and I said, okay, I'd like a Coke, and then I want a double. I had to keep saying it in my head because I didn't even know what it was. I said, I'll take a double such and such and such, and a Coke. So the bartender goes over and he gets the Coke, brings it, and gets the drink, and I said, how much is that? And he says, that'll be $65. And I looked at him, I said, how much? And he said, $65.
Elmsley stuck you.
And I was like, oh, okay. So paid it and took it back and set the drinks down.
Here you go, Alex.
Here you go. He said,
enjoy that.
He said, thanks, appreciate it. And so I learned a valuable lesson at that point.
And I just learned a valuable lesson.
So that was a funny Alex element, but he was a great guy. I think I got a Christmas card from him one year. I made a set of cards for him. He wanted me to make him a what's the trick he does with the backs that keep changing it? Dazzle. He wanted me to make him a set of Dazzle cards, so I made it. And then I think that year I got a Christmas card from him, and then so that was about it. That's the only time I really saw Alex. But I never thought I'd ever get a chance to see Alex Elmsley. I heard all the rumors when in '75 he came over and he toured. And what happened was, at least the story that I heard was that he saw so many of his people magicians that he looked up to, like Vernon and Charlie Miller and these guys, just having a rough time making a living with it, and he got really depressed, and he went home and he's like, he just kind of dropped out of magic there for a while, and so then luckily somehow 20 or 25 years later or so, he decided to come over. I don't really know how they talked him into coming over and filming. I don't remember hearing that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they did, and I never ever expected to get a chance to meet him or buy him a $65 drink.
That's great. You said something a minute ago about you making the Dazzle cards for him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the cards plant and how that kind of got started?
Well,
I was just trying to remember if we talked about it or if that was just before we started.
Yeah,
but,
I don't think we did. Basically, I always was intrigued with gaff cards, double backers, facers, and all these different gaff tricks, and I wanted to make them, but you had to have certain tools to make them right. I think the first place, I learned how to split cards. Splitting cards is not the trick.
Yeah.
How you put them together is the trick. So I learned how to split cards early on. Splitting was very easy. I learned it from Expert Card Technique in the back. So splitting was easy.
And currently, do you still use that method for splitting?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I guess the next thing after I learned how to split them is like, okay, how do you put these things together? Glue doesn't work. They warped and all this. So I read. I had a set of Derek Dingle's lecture notes. Derek used to make gaff cards for tannins back in the 60s. And in his lecture notes, he explained about this glue called dry mount tissue. And it's what's used, these like t-shirt, use a heat press.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want something dry mounted, like a photograph, they take a backing and they put this. It's a sheet of paper, but it's actually a glue, and then you put the paper.
Like an iron?
Well, it's the same thing as an iron. Yeah, it's a big iron. You know how they put these decals on T-shirts? They put them in there and then they heat them.
Yeah.
It's the same process. But the dry mount tissue was used for, putting a photograph. Here's a photograph, and you wanted to put it on a backing, so they would heat it that way. So anyhow, Derek didn't figure it out. I'm not going to be able to remember this guy's name, unfortunately. A gentleman figured out that if you took a sheet of the dry mount tissue and you doubled it over and then put the two thin pieces of cards and then heated it, that would give you the perfect thickness and a perfect snap.
That snap, yeah.
And so Derek published, that idea in his lecture notes. So I read that, but again, okay, dry mount press, dry mount tissue, how you going to, I don't want to take an X-Acto knife and around the corners and hit a corner rounder. So the next thing I know, I'm like, okay, I want to make this double backer. And now I've got $3,000 invested in a press
to make
and
a double
trimmer
backer.
to make a double backer. And I'm like, well, I can make really good double backers now, but it costs me, $3,000. I was very lucky. I actually have the trimmer and corner rounder that made all of the Brother John Hammond gaffs.
Oh my!
Wow.
That was the first trimmer I bought. It was John Mendoza. I was out it was probably during the Marlo lecture.
The 30 years later.
30 years later, I believe it was there, and John Mendoza said, I'm going to be selling off. This was in a magic shop, Jean DeVoe's magic shop. He says, I've got some stuff I'm going to be selling. I've got a corner rounder and a trimmer. Well, see, I didn't have them at this point, and I was like, oh, I've really been wanting them. And the price was crazy. It was so crazy good. I think it was like $300 for the trimmer and rounder together. I mean, it was just really, really good. So anyway, I bought it.
Yeah.
Bought them from him. And then I had to go out and dig out the press, which was quite expensive. And so with Dingle's notes and then all the apparatus, I was able to then make a decent card. So then you learn, okay, how about a split face? And then, of course, whole different method, the dental dam cards with the flaps that everybody's making now. So I thought, well, I'd have some friends that would say, well, make me one of those, make me one, and I would. And so, I had heard about this gentleman out in California, Cards by Martin, who, that's what he did. He made gaff cards for magicians. And I was told, he'd take a briefcase into the Magic Castle on Friday night, and, everybody would come over and kind of like a bootlegger, he'd be selling his wares there at the castle. And I thought, well, I could do that. And so I just started making up tricks that I was aware of that was on the market, and then I somehow came up with a few of my own ideas, the magnetized card and rising cards and things like that. And then I thought, well, it'd be nice if I could, if I had a business, I could write off some of this stuff and go to conventions and write off my airfare if I'm a dealer like I am here at the Magi-Fest. And so, one thing led to another, and I started a little business out of my home, the card plant, and it's been a lot of fun. It's amazing. I've run one ad in my entire life on making this stuff, and I've sold to so many countries. I mean, you wouldn't believe, just all over the world. Yeah. And it's word of mouth only. That's what blows my mind. Malaysia and just everywhere. That okay, how in the world does this person even know that I've making these cards? So very.
I remember,
very intriguing.
Like I think it was actually here the first time I met you, and it was when Tamariz was here, and I guess he had requested that you make him some type of gaff. And I just remember, like, I think I was just meeting you, and Juan comes up, and you gave him the cards and stuff, and I was like, oh, man, like, Juan's getting cards from Gary, like, makes good stuff.
Yeah, I've it's amazing. I mean, I can't even remember them all, but probably one of the things that I was the happiest about was I had sent Ricky Jay a couple of my tricks, and he really didn't know Ricky very well at that time, and so about 2 weeks after I sent him these tricks, he calls me on the phone. It's like, "Hey Gary, this is Ricky Jay," and I was like, "Holy crap!" So
what was the impetus for sending those to him?
I just thought, because of the nature of the trick, I thought he might enjoy it.
Okay.
I just thought, this seems like something he might like. I think I sent Steve Freeman some, and him some, and so he calls me and he's like, I've really wanted to do this trick in one of my shows, and I think you've got the method for doing it. So anyway, I got to go see on the stem. He performed his version, of this trick, and it was wonderful. I was very happy to get to see that. But I made cards for Harry Blackstone Jr. He called me one time, and he wanted to do one of his father's tricks, so he wanted some belly strippers. So I made him a deck of belly strippers and sent them to him, and all kinds of people, Mike Close and Jeff McBride, the magnetized cards.
Yep.
There's all kinds of people that use that, and
do you have any interest in making gaps out of any of these newfangled custom playing cards, or are you happy to stick with?
No, I don't mind. I mean, I don't carry them. I pretty much stick to bicycle just because that's what I have. But I have people send me, just like Jeff. I was down in the dealer's room. Jeff just gave me a whole deck of his cards. He does the magnetized cards, but he wants to use his own deck. So he just gave me the cards and said, "Here, here's some money, and make me up so many of these and send them to me." So I don't mind using the other cards, but typically the people have to send me the cards.
Okay.
Sure. I want to do it. And I'm not pushing for that because I'm busy enough as it is. But I do get people that say, "Hey, I'd really like to have this in this card," and if I can make it, there's no guarantee I can make it. You never know how the cards are going to split or things like that. But
sure.
Yeah, I have no problem making them in any kind of design. What do you think?
I don't know. We covered a whole lot of history. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think we've been going?
I don't have a clue.
You don't have a clue?
I don't have a clue.
I think you'll be surprised. Yeah. We've been going for about an hour 40.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is pretty
good. Pretty good. Because we were like 45 minutes is probably pretty good.
Yeah.
So an hour and 45 minutes.
I'm super pleased, and I'd be happy to talk some more if there's anything you want to talk about.
One of the things I like to do is I love photographs. I collect photographs.
Yeah.
Particularly autographed photographs. I got some wonderful ones of Francis Carlisle and Vernon and Slidini. So I was just going to look through these photographs on Facebook. Oh, okay, there we go.
Any Jennings stories or anything?
Oh man, I just remember we just let Did you know Jim Patton?
Yes,
I knew Jim.
He passed away.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would really hated to hear that.
Sad.
Oh, yeah, I got one.
Okay.
Yeah, see, that's what I said. I just need something to jog my memory. So I'm at an early.
Can you see the picture?
Well, I just seen Charlie Miller sitting there with Jim. That's what jogged my memory.
All right.
So this was definitely one of the first Las Vegas desert seminars. So 80 or 81. I'm 24 or 25 years old at the most. And I had heard so much about Charlie Miller, especially his deals and things. And Charlie happened to be there at the convention. Well, there was a little party the first night, and they had these little tables, kind of like this one, sitting right here. I'm going to tell you? Did I tell you this already?
Yeah.
And so there's this little table sitting here, and Charlie's sitting here, and he's by himself. So I'm sitting about 6 feet away at another table. Uh-huh. He's by himself. I'm by myself. And I was very shy. I just wouldn't approach anybody at that point in time. And so Charlie's sitting there, and I'm just in my head. I'm going, why don't you just go over there, and introduce yourself and just talk to him. And then about that time, this kid, he's about looking to be maybe 12 years old, and he walks over, and he's got a deck of cards, and he says, Mr. Miller, he says, would you show me your second deal? And he hands him the deck of cards, and I'm going, here's a 12-year-old kid doing it. So I'm thinking, but I'm going to get to see it. Now this won't, I don't know how this will play over the air, but so Charlie takes the cards and he's sitting there, and so I'm looking right straight across at him, and he takes the cards and he holds them and he gets ready to do the deal, and he looks over at me, over at the right. He looks over at me, and he stands up and he turns his back to me, and he starts doing, and he does the deal, and I was crushed. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So that's one of my funny stories about Charlie Miller. But I mean, he just looked and he just turned around. So I didn't.
You should have come and asked.
Wasn't able to see a single thing.
But you saw it eventually.
No.
You never saw it?
Never saw Charlie. I saw Charlie do a lot of his stage material. That's something. Charlie Miller doing card stuff, forget it. It's not out there.
Wow.
It's not, and that's unfortunate. Steve Freeman tells me he was the best card man that lived.
Wow.
You know, and so it's I find it. I think Charlie wanted it that way.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess if that's what he wanted, that's the way it should be. Oh my goodness, there's so many people. You asked about Larry Jennings. I didn't really. I mean, I met Larry up at 4F, and we sat up there and did card tricks for each other. And he was still with L&L then. He asked me, you know, hey, well, you ought to do a book. You know, you got all this stuff. And I think they were trying to find people to do books with him at that point in time. But poor Larry. I mean, he didn't take care of himself, and drank and smoked, and you know, ended up in wheelchair, and you know, all those guys. You know, I was telling my wife, you know, Larry and Bruce Servon, and Mike Skinner. These guys died, you know, way too early. You know, they were all in early. I think Mike may have even been in his late 50s. I don't remember exactly, but early 60s, and you know, it's just so unfortunate. But they all smoked. You know, they all smoked a lot. And Martin Nash. Back when I was getting into deals, I got to see Martin Nash about 2 or 3 years after I bought his books. I mean, to me, he was a god. I mean, he was like, man, everything I read I really loved his tricks. His tricks were good, and of course, he had his technique for all this. And I will say, I went to Cincinnati, Ohio. I went to Haynes House of Cards. They had him there to lecture, and thoroughly enjoyed the lecture. I was a little disappointed on the technique. It wasn't what I had hoped for. Tremendous entertainer, probably one of the best gambling entertainers that's, you know, ever lived. But you know, I was just expecting all these just impossible bottom deals and center deals, and you know, they were good, but they weren't what I had expected. I had high dreams.
I'm curious about, you know,
there's early 1980.
I've seen this picture. I love looking through the pictures on your Facebook.
Yeah, that was the first time I met him.
I'm curious about if, like,
there's Michael.
Oh man. Oh gosh.
Yeah, I like putting these pictures up.
I'm curious about if there were, like, you know, heroes that you had whose tricks you loved when you were, you know, in magic performing for magicians, that now you look back and you go, that's not really a great trick. Magic. This is not really a great magical trick. Is that you don't have to name any names, but I just mean, as your perspective changed on what magic is and who you should perform for.
Well, you know, like we were talking a while ago, for 30 years I performed magic for magicians, and there's a lot of really bad tricks.
Yeah.
You should never perform for laymen. That you'll go ahead and do for magicians. You know, just thinking that, okay, it's going to fool them. They're not going to know how you did it. And if that's your goal, then you're going to go ahead and do it even if it's a lousy trick.
Yep.
If there's a ton of counting
12
again.
packets counting backwards with the alphabet.
Yeah, but if it fools them, it's okay. So, that stuff. But unfortunately, what I hate is when people do those tricks for laymen, and then, they get a bad taste in their mouth about what magic is. I don't want to see a card trick. I've seen enough of the card tricks.
Yeah.
But no, I'm very particular with any tricks, card tricks or non-card tricks that I do for laymen.
Sure.
But no, as far as anything particular, nothing jumps to mind. Right.
Is there anything that you learned from your students while you were teaching that you apply now? I mean, just based off of interacting with so many people every day, that you apply now that you're performing?
It's very funny. You would think that being a teacher, it wouldn't bother you to get up in front of people, and talk. But I was never, it was something I always, every year, had to get into again with a new group of people. I never was real, like I said, with the students, I was comfortable in front of them because, my subject area and all that, I knew more than they did. At least I hoped I did in most cases. And, but I was never one that liked to get up in front of people and talk or perform. Now, I did try to, and again, I taught chemistry. I didn't have time to do magic or anything like that in school. What I did try to do is take 2 days out of the year, and I literally, honest to God, I'd have kids coming in my room the first day. Oh, when are you going to show us your magic tricks? Because they had brothers and sisters earlier on that knew I did magic. I'm like, well, it's going to be quite a while before you see anything. So at the end of the first semester,
you're going to learn today.
Could you imagine, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you imagine if you were like getting into magic, and then you got really into gambling stuff and gaff tricks, and then Gary Plants was your like teacher?
Chemistry teacher.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's all right. So anyway, I would try to take 2 days out of the year because a lot of times we'd be new kids come in the second semester, and so I wanted them all to be able to see a little bit of magic. So I would take the last day of the first semester and then the last day of the year, and I would do a close-up show for them. And I let them. We had those lab tables in there, so they could all stand around the lab table, and I would have my close-up man and perform maybe a 25-minute close-up show for them. And I did that, and that was about it really. And it was the kids I'd had all year, so I was pretty comfortable with that. So that was really the only, as far as when school goes, that was the only magic that I ever did for them. And so now the teaching, the being up in front of people, has helped me a little bit. I mean, I was shocked. When was the first time I was on stage? I guess MagicCon. I think it was MagicCon was the first time.
That's a scary stage
when I did that. I'd never been on stage with stage lights with a crowd.
Yeah.
And I walked out, and it's like these bright lights, and it's like I couldn't see it. It was like I was talking to nobody.
Yeah.
And it was such a strange feeling. And then the same thing with here. I did a little. They asked me to do that 15-minute little thing on the Zero Shuffle, and it was the same thing. I get up, but I could see a bit more for whatever reason. The lighting or something was better. That was a little intimidating for me because I've never done that type of thing before.
That kind of stuff to me, and I think this is a fairly good analogy, but I think getting up on stage like that when you're really well lit, you can't see the audience. To me, that feels like you're swimming in the ocean and there are sharks around. Especially at MagicCon because you've got people like Weber in the audience and like just great minds and people you look up to, and you go up on that stage and you can't see any of them, but they're out there.
And plus, it depends on what you're teaching too. I mean, here I am giving tips on the Zero Shuffle. Here's 800 people, and I don't see the screens, and trying to explain all the little touches and finesses that was difficult. That was difficult. But I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it just for the experience. Every time you do it, it's going to get easier. And same way with starting to perform for lay people. It's like, okay, I'm going to have to make myself do it. I don't really want to do it, but I need to do it. And so, it's the same way with that being on stage. I've been on there twice. I think if I had to do it again, it would be a little bit easier the next time. So, yeah. So, old man and still learning new tricks, learning how to.
That's great. I think that's so inspiring, and I know people that maybe wouldn't say it themselves, but are very much not interested in performing for lay people. Just do magic for magicians, even though that's not right now is a nice time because it's not really cool to be that person right now. Because you've got really great, strong performers that are also selling their material so they're known and well appreciated. But I know people now that are really in magic to fool magicians. And to hear, from yourself that you did it for 30 years and have kind of
regret,
but have just kind of you're continuing to evolve as a magician and a performer. I think that's awesome. I think that's something a lot of people can appreciate.
I was just talking to my buddy Dave Williamson. I met David when he was about 17, 18, and he was down at the booth. And you wouldn't have believed David. That's a whole other story I should have told. David was one of the shyest, quietest young men that I ever met. It was unbelievable magic. He wouldn't hardly say a word, though, but he was doing this knuckle-busting, just impossible stuff for a couple of years. And then one day, I go in and now he's the zany, crazy David that we know today. And I was like, holy, what happened? Where did this come from? And I asked him not too long ago. He was down in Galveston. He was off of a cruise ship. So Debbie and I drove down and had breakfast with him. And I asked him, I said, David, what happened to you? When did you decide to be the David that you are today? And he said it was when he saw Tom Mullica. He said he went to Atlanta, went to Mullica's bar, and he said, I saw that you don't have to be a serious magician, that you can be funny and have a good time and laugh and still do good magic. And he said, I decided that's what I want to do. I want to be funny and all this. So it was Mullica who really inspired David to do that. And David's great. I love David. Matter of fact, we went to see Slidini. He was lecturing in Galion, Ohio. It was 1979, I think, somewhere in that range. And David, there was about 9 of us. We all went in one hotel room, and we stayed up all night. Slidini was lecturing the next morning. That was the first time I met David, and so we're all over. There's 6 people on the floor, and 3 of bed, and we stayed up so late that we overslept. And we missed the first hour of Slidini's lecture. Yeah. He lectured about 6 hours, and we saw like 5 hours. So we wake up, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, what time is it? And so we rushed down, got in the car, and ran down to where the lecture was being given. And but yeah, David's a great guy, great magician, and he'll do anything for a laugh. That's for sure. My sister. Here's one on David. So we're at the Magi-Fest. This was. Maybe 10 years ago, and my wife's with me, and my wife's sister was with me, and another girlfriend of theirs, and they're here. My wife comes. She didn't come for the magic convention. She went to visit her sister who lives in this area, and they had a friend, and David was there at the convention. So he's sitting there, and my wife's sister's at the check-in place, and she's with their other friend. And Debbie says, have David go do something. And I said, all right. I said, David. I said, see those 2 girls over there? I said, that's my wife's sister. That's that's my wife's sister and a friend of hers. Go over there and do something crazy. So he walks over where they're standing, and he puts his hand down and he leans on the counter and he's like, "Hello, ladies," and he starts doing his usual spiel. And then, so we're sitting over watching this from a distance, and he's talking like he's some suave, debonair thing. And then all of a sudden, his pants drops to his ankles. He just, boom, right to the floor. And they scream at the top of their lungs, "Ah!" You hear the scream. And, so he'd do anything, anything to get a laugh.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But, oh my goodness, we've had some fun times. Yeah. You meet a lot of wonderful people in magic. That's the thing. I can say there's 2 people in magic that out of all the hundreds, if not thousands of people in magic, 99.9% of them are really great people. I can honestly say there's only 2 people that I really don't care for that's in magic. I'm not mentioning them. No, I'm not mentioning their names. You probably know, but
those are pretty good odds, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, and it's amazing. Most people are very, very nice people.
The camaraderie of the community is just, there, and it comes up so often just in conversation, but it's one of those things where, there's no other community where you could go to a different country, and if you're a dentist, call up a dentist from the phone book and say, "Hey man, can I crash on your couch?"
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Well, and even just like getting when I drove in last night, and like you were off doing whatever, and so I just walked in and saw some guys I hadn't seen in 2 years. It was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And just picked up right where we left off, and that's just a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we were at Juan's house, he invited all the Spanish magicians over, and it's just like your best buddies. I mean, you don't really know them; you just meet them, but they treat you like they've known you all your whole life.
Yeah.
And
well, even you're a good example. How I got to know Gary. I moved to Houston. I didn't know a soul, and we had met at a few conferences and stuff like that, and so I just let you know and go get lunch and go hang out at the house, and I look forward to it every week because what I don't have anything else to do. I don't know anyone else, so it's
right.
my adopted magic family in Houston. So
yeah, that's fun. You just didn't make it around often enough, but it was good.
I appreciated it.
It was a fun time. But magic's wonderful. It's been good to me. I can't imagine, my life without it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That sounds unpleasant. Life without magic.
Yeah,
no, please.
Really. It's you meet a lot of interesting people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this with us, Gary.
I really can't thank you enough. This has been just a delight.
Yeah.
Such a wonderful.
Just a treasure.
I don't know about that.
I absolutely know about it, and just like your mission to keep all of that material and all of those videos, this will just be another piece to add to the collection of stories and.
That's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you so
thank you
much.
guys. It's been fun.
Is there anything you want to plug before we finish up? The card plant?
Card plant?
No. I'm
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Good to go. Thank
All
you
right.
guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.